Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is our year-end webinar series hosted by Professional Services and presented by Scott Rockins. Today's webinar is Get Your Inventory Ready for Year-End, and this is part one of two. This one is about scan batches. Scott, go
All
for it,
right,
man.
thanks, Kyle. Hello, everyone. So, as Kyle mentioned, this is a two-part series, or these two back-to-back webinars kind of go together. This one's going to be about how you use scanners with our counting tool. And as there's a little bit of overlap between how you use scanners and how you use, say, just paper, it does kind of continue into the next webinar. But today we'll cover the things that are specific to using scanners to count. So of course, the reason it's important to count your inventory is to get your stock right for year end, to make sure you have great stock control and you can deliver to your clients. I want to start off just to gauge the audience a little bit real quick. I'd like to know if you have used Windward in the past to count. Okay, I'm just going to run that for just a few more seconds. Okay. So more of you have used it than have not. So some of this will probably be review for those of you who've counted before, and some of it will be like new little tidbits. And for those of you that have never counted before, there's a lot of different things to talk about when you're counting. So we'll cover a lot of them here, but it's probably not possible to cover everything. So I'm going to start with just a little bit about why we're talking about this and what we're going to try and cover today. So there are a few steps to counting using System 5. One step is to create the list of things you're going to count, or a count batch. That's the same whether you're using scanning technology or paper and pen and pencil. Then there's a scan batch, which is used with scanners, and we're going to talk about that. So we're going to talk about both of those things today, and the count batches also apply to the next presentation. We're going to talk about developing an accuracy KPI for counting your inventory, a rating of how closely and tightly you're controlling your stock, to give you something to shoot for each time you count, whether that's annually or monthly, quarterly, something like that. And we will talk about understanding the variance reports and accounting effects of counting. That is something we'll talk about in more detail in the next webinar than we will today, because it affects whether you're counting with paper and pencil or with a scanner. You still need to check what's the accounting effect of my count and how accurate was I. Same with the KPI, really. So the first concept we're going to talk about is the concept of a count batch. So this is, how do I choose which inventory I'm going to count? And how do I group it? Now there are two basic styles here. One is a blank count, where you just tell the system what you're going to count as you go. And the other one is a periodic count, which is the system tells you what it believes you have, and then you tell it what you find. So it sort of guides you as to what to count. In either case, one key thing to understand, and one of the most common misunderstandings with our counting tool, is that when you create the count batch, which we'll do in just one moment, that takes a snapshot of your inventory levels at the time you hit build new batch. And it backdates the numbers you type into the count batch or scan into the count batch to that point in time. The good news about that is that even though it might take you a day, say, to count everything, or a weekend, it will backdate to the time that you took the snapshot. So the key to creating the count batch is to do it immediately before you start counting. To enter the numbers into the count batch, you have some leeway, although it's still good to do it as quickly as possible because it's backdated. It will backdate. So say you start your count batch on a Friday, you count over the weekend, you can enter in your information that you find Monday or Tuesday, but the count batch needed to be created on the Friday before you started counting. And it's also most advantageous if you can avoid any sales going on or receiving going on while you count. So we're going to look at creating a count batch in System 5. If this is new, if you've never used Windward to count, then this is the first step. Now, I will say this. The first step to any inventory count is probably you want to back up your software. This is one of those procedures that's going to change the stock levels throughout your system. It's a good idea to have a backup of your software before you proceed. To find the inventory counting tool, go to Inventory and Purchases and Physical Inventory Count. Now, here in the counting tool, the first thing you're going to do is create a count batch. And you do that by hitting the New button. You can also find previous ones you've created by hitting the Find button. So I'll hit New here. You can give the batch a name if you want. The date usually works pretty well, though. If you do have multiple locations, you choose which one you're talking about here. And this is maybe the larger choice. There's two selections here. The periodic stock count is going to create a list of product that you'll go count and bring back the number you find. The uninitialized stock count, typically used when you're first starting the system, creates a blank list that you fill in as you choose. So most of the time you're doing periodic stock count, and that's what we're going to do today. You can assign it to someone too, but we'll leave that out for the moment. Now, before I hit this build button, that takes the snapshot. I apologize for my dog. She waits for the webinar to start before she starts barking. It's her cue. You have several options you can choose to and filters you can choose to determine what's going to be on your list of things to count. To go through all of these isn't feasible in our webinar here, but here's some culprits. Are you going to count the stock that you have reserved for customers on a work order or not? If you're going to exclude it, you want to tick this and then be sure not to count it. If you need to count that stuff because it's still in your warehouse or staging area, include it. It's similar with special order stock or RMAs, which is warranty product. If you have a lot of overselling, this is going to sound counterintuitive, you want that off. If there's more time, we'll discuss oversolds in more detail. But strangely, if you want to remove the oversolds you have in your system, you leave this off at this stage. Now, you also have these filters. Now, these are very helpful, especially if you want to do something like cycle counting. Specifically, category, just counting one category might make sense. If you have location codes and you always put product away in the same spots, those location codes can be a great way to organize your counting. Or by vendor, if you organize your showroom or your warehouse by the vendor. All great ways to do a filter to only count some of your stock or cycle count your stock. In my example, I'm just going to build a master list of everything in my system by hitting build. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this first part. You have to find the one that makes sense for you, and it's different for every business. So I'm going to hit build. Now this has built my count batch. So in my case, this is a list of everything in my software and what the system believes I have as of 1:10 p.m. Pacific time on the 30th of November. And it will backdate whatever I type in here to that date and time, no matter when I type it in, which is great because that means although I need to go count right now, once I'm done counting, I can enter in the numbers kind of at my leisure. Although I will note, the sooner the better for these things. Okay, so the next step is where we get into the scanners. Now, I'm going to show two types of scanner use today, and I want to focus today on the scanners. So I'm just going to use my camera for a moment so that I can show you specifically which devices or types of device that I'm using. So I'm going to use this scanner today. This is a very typical scanner that has a little cradle like this. This one's a Datalogic, I think. Yeah. Although there's lots of these are very straightforward devices, and this is the most common thing. This is great for reading barcodes. This needs to be plugged into your terminal though. So it doesn't have a lot of range. So it's not great for that. This is what I'm going to do first. We call this direct scan because it's plugged right into a terminal. What I'm going to do second is our newer technology, which is using a TC21 Android phone or a TC26 Android phone. And we've created a little app that you put on the phone. And this phone is actually a barcode scanner. And if you've seen us advertising the scan app, that's it on the phone right there. So I'm going to use that. This is different in that this operates on your Wi-Fi. And so I can take this throughout my warehouse or showroom and scan barcodes. And then I bring back that list and upload it. And you'll see me do that. There's different parts that are good about each. This has more mobility, of course. But when you scan a barcode, it does not know if your system recognizes the barcode until you upload your list. So you need to make sure the system knows all your barcodes for this to work well. Well, both, but this one especially. This one here will honk at you if you scan something and it doesn't know the barcode. I'll demonstrate that. And so it's a good feedback loop when you're using this, but this needs to be plugged into a terminal. And if you're not on the cloud, then this little guy has no way to be plugged into the terminal, usually in a warehouse situation. So we're going to do those one at a time. So we're going to do scanning. We're going to do the direct scan first. That's the handheld scanner. Looks like a ray gun, the most common one you'll see. Now that we have our count batch, you do something a little different. You keep your count batch, and now you're going to create a scan batch. So I'll click on the scan batch tab, and I'm going to hit new. When I hit new, I pick a scan source. I'm going to do the direct scan first. So I'm going to choose direct scan, scan batch, and hit build. Scan batches are sub count lists, I'd say. So for example, if I have a warehouse with 4 walls, my count batch includes everything in the warehouse, for example. I might have one person with one scanner count the left wall, and I'd make them a scan batch. I might name it left wall. Another person with another scanner counts the right wall. And each of these scan batches or sub lists, sub counts, is fed into the main list by having it applied to the count batch. So first, I'll just scan some products here. And I'm using the direct scan approach, so I'm plugged right into my terminal. I'm scanning some product. Oh, it doesn't recognize that product. That means the system doesn't know that barcode. Another common misunderstanding is that your system will just know barcodes. You need to load them in or get them from your vendor or manually add them to your product. And that's a big part of the prep for using barcode scanning if you've never done it before, is either data loading in barcodes. That's the most efficient way. A lot of our integrations help you with this problem as well, and they load in barcodes. Or I've had some customers recently who just use their manual barcode scanners before the count to set up barcodes. So you can see I can scan a product multiple times, and that adds to my list. So I go about doing that, scanning everything in the area that I've set aside. And I save that. There's little gotchas there. You got to make sure that people don't both scan the same product. You got to make sure that the product has barcodes. Mostly that's it. So that's the first scanner type. That's direct scan approach using a more common barcode scanner. And that barcode scanner that I showed you there is also very useful for receiving product and point of sale. So it has multiple purposes. It's quite useful. So I save that, and now what I'm going to do is apply that back to the count batch, and you'll see how that works. So I'll hit the apply button, And then I'm looking for the count batch. So this is the one I just created right there. You can tell by the time. And I hit OK. And the system goes through and applies all the product, the counts that I've found, back to the main batch, or the count batch. Just so you see the effect, I'm going to go back to the count batch here. And I'll pull it up. Actually, I think it's still here. Yeah, it's still here under count entry. And with the count batch, one little tidbit here is you can sort it. So here's the products I just counted. And so you can see how the scan batches feed into the main batch. Now we'll do another scan batch, and we're going to use the other scanner just because it's a slightly different approach. So I'm going to leave my count batch, go back to scan batch. Sometimes you gotta close out of one scan batch before you can get a new one. Just a sec here. Yeah, often scan batches are done on different terminals. So I'm just going to close out of here, come back in the physical inventory count, and go to the scan batch and choose scan batch, hit new. This time, I'm going to use the data collector. Now, data collectors are a technology that's been around a long time. The TC21 scan app is just a way to use a phone as a data collector. You can also use this approach by loading in a file if you're using some other form of data collector. When you think data collector or you think the scan app, what you have to think is this is a great strategy because I can be mobile, I can be away from Windward while I count. It's a bad strategy for the same reason. The system doesn't know whether the barcode is good, and Windward knows it, or not, because it's just a little scanner. So I'll scan some product here, and you won't see anything coming in because it's just happening on my phone, which is quite easy to use once you get the hang of it. And now I bring the phone back within Wi-Fi range, and through the Wi-Fi on my app, I hit upload. And now you'll see at the bottom of my screen, it says data collector 3. So what that means is there was 3 barcodes received. And up here, I'm going to hit import from my data collector. You can see there's also the ability to import from a file. And we'll see some products that I had sitting on my counter here. Score minis, also vital to any good inventory count, and keep your staff energy levels elevated. So here you can see I've got these in my scan batch. Now, one problem that happens here is that a barcode will come in. Let me scan a barcode I don't have in the system, and I'll show you. And let's see what I got here. I'll upload another product. And I know this one. So I go and scan 200 things. And I have a file I bring in. I hit import, data collector, honk. This was not found. And I don't really have a good way of knowing what that is, especially not if there's 200 of them. So you need to have the barcodes in the system for the scan app to be a good solution for you. And getting the barcodes into your system involves data loading, integration, or some manual process. And that's something you might want some help with. So now I have my scan batch. I'm going to remove this one item because it's not, the system doesn't know what it is. I'm going to save that scan batch, and then I'm going to hit apply. And again, I'll choose my count batch. That's this one up here. And hit OK. And the scan batch applies back to the count batch. So I can go look at my count batch here. I'm going to have to pull it up. So I'll go count batch and find. And right here, I can see the products that I've counted. So those are really the steps to do with scanning. And the common gotchas with scanning are your system doesn't know the barcodes. It needs to be taught the barcodes before this will work. And the other gotchas are just to make sure that your employees don't double scan things. So it's really easy with scan batches to accidentally count the same thing twice, or to not count something at all. So the things we're going to talk about just here at the end of this webinar, and we'll follow up on them in the following webinar, is how do I deal with those problems? The counting or the scanning is now done, and I'm looking at my count batch. And again, the count batch is used regardless of which approach, scanning or counting manually. So if I was counting manually, I'm typing in numbers like that. And of course, there's a lot of numbers here that I might not have. A couple little handy tools that we'll have time for today. Once you've scanned the product, you can see I've got some of it scanned in and I've counted that, but I have all these blanks. There's this area up here at the top, 0 uncounted items, and usually end up using this. So I can click 0 only the out of stock. So what that'll do is if I have a product, let me see if I can find one like that right there, where there's 0 in stock, I can have the system assume that there is 0, and I can hit 0 now, and it'll whip through the whole list and fill in zeros where there was zeros on the left. So if the system thought I had 0, I'll report that we found 0. Now that is you telling the system that there's in fact 0. So you shouldn't take it for granted, but if to fill in all the blanks quickly, that's how you can do it. If you click 0 all, then this will go through and put a 0 on the right-hand side regardless of what's over here, which you probably don't want to do until you've been through the list. So if someone's telling me that these products here, these 21, that I have 0, maybe that's true, but I'd be a little suspicious. And before I proceed, I'd want to double check. So in the interest of time today, I'm not going to go a lot further, because we're going to kind of pick this up where we left off next week. And there's probably some questions. The key parts to using scanners, again, just to reiterate, are you really need to have the barcodes in the system for this to be a viable option for you. So part of the procedure of preparing for it the first time is to have the barcodes in. And you need to have a good plan for who's going to count which stock and set up separate scan batches and know which kind of technology you're going to use, data collectors or scanners, like regular scanners. So my next question for all of you, just so I get a feel for the situation, is are you counting by the end of this calendar year this year? So a good portion of you are counting this year in the next month or so. And follow-up question to that, because we're curious to know, how many of you have had help in learning how to do this from professional services? So the team that helped you go live originally, that's the 4 of us or 5 of us in professional services. Okay, so an equal portion of you have not had assistance before. If you're finding that you struggle with this process each year, there's a lot of parts to it. I'm going to highly recommend this is a place where extra help goes a long ways. Myself and Alan and Robert and Harry help people with this all the time. It really helps to have someone watching your back from beginning to end when you plan this out. And so we'll show you the kind of packages you can purchase to get extra help with it. And we're going to give you more answers in the next webinar. But I can't stress it enough. This is such an important part of your business. You may really want to get some extra help with this. And everyone's situation is different. So it is not possible in a webinar or a group training session to help everyone with their specific problems. At this stage, though, I did want to quickly address one question, which I know can haunt everybody. And so thank you, Joe, for bringing this up. Joe is asking, clear oversold when processed? Do I check this? Do I not check this? And why? So when you're overselling product as a regular part of your workflow, you want to get rid of those at year end usually, because of course a -5 is not a valuable number to have in your inventory. To get rid of oversolds, there are 2 tick boxes. So you're going to want that one on, Joe, the one that I have ticked right there. And I'm just going to save my work here, go back to creating a count batch. So I'm going to make another one just so you can see how I do it. I'll go to the options tab. You actually want that off. This is a little hard to explain. If I'm oversold and I'm at -2, and then I go count and find that I have 3. If I tick this box to include oversold, that will add 5 because I found 3 and the system thought I was oversold by 2. So the adjustment is from -2 to +3, add 5. If that's what you want, then you tick this box right here. Most of the time, that's not what you want. You just want the oversolds to go away, and whatever you found in the count is what you want your system to say, which would say 3 in this example. Then you leave it off there, and when you're processing your batch, which we're going to do in the next webinar, you want that clear oversolds ticked. So that way the oversolds go away and it replaces them with the actual amount you counted, which is, say, in my example, 3. Did that help, Joe? Basically, don't tick it here, tick it on the other screen. Your oversolds go away. Any other questions anyone wants to throw in there? Okay. Oh, here's one. A couple more. Okay. So, Marla, thank you for the question. Will those items show up if you scan and they are not listed because of oversolds? Marla, I think you mean if you don't include oversolds here. Yes. So, yeah, if you want to make sure you're counting, that's a good point. You want to include, no, they do show up. They do show up. So what doesn't happen is it doesn't include the negative quantity in the adjustment. So either way, oversold products show up on your list, on your count batch, no matter what you do. If you have -3 of something, it'll show -3. But when you count that you actually have 2, if you tick include oversolds here, it includes the negative in the adjustment. So it goes up by 5 instead of up by 2. Most of the time, people just want the oversolds to go away, forget it ever happened, and add the correct number to stock. And Joe, sometimes there are, I see your question here, and someone said that there's a bug with this. Well, I'm not aware of that, not to say that there isn't one. Just in these webinars, I don't have time to go down those rabbit holes, unfortunately. So it is working in my version, though. I'm using version 7, so I think we're probably okay. I have one What I would suggest to everyone is that it's the end of the year. If you're going through this and you're uncertain and you really want to get it right, get our help. And we're eager and happy to help everyone with their year-end count as part of a professional services package. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Kyle, and we can just talk about a little bit of some of the promotions that are going on. I don't hear you, Kyle. You there? I might be out of the loop here, folks. Can you guys hear Kyle? Someone want to just shoot me a question? Okay. He might. Kyle is here visiting us at our lovely head office, and he may be having some technical difficulties at the hotel. So let me just grab there's a few good deals on, so let me show you just a moment. I'll show you a couple things. That's Scott Rockins talking ahead of his slides again. So first of all, there are some free resources that are actually quite good to do with physical inventory counting, because this is one of those parts of our software that's been around a long time. And although there's sometimes updates to it or little problems with it, it has worked for a very long time for a lot of people. And once you get it down, it's a very handy tool. Use it more often than once a year would be my advice. There's a quick reference guide. There's also good articles in our knowledge base about strategies on how to set yourself up. And if you search in the Learning Academy and use the tag inventory account, you're going to find some good content there as well. So there's lots of opportunity to train yourself up and practice in your training module. When it comes to working with my team, we work with people to plan this out, prepare them for barcoding, and help them follow through on an inventory count, usually just virtually, but it can be even possible in person with enough lead time. Myself and Harry, Robert, and Alan do this quite often. So we can help you understand the consequences of your count, understand the accounting consequences of your account as well, and kind of lead it through it end to end. Although really it's just a matter of getting some of our time, and there's a number of packages you can buy. We do have a good deal, of course, through all these webinars, getting 10% off by using the coupon code year-end 2023. And what I'll do here is show you one other thing, which is just our little old website, which I'm sure you visit from time to time. And you can find these services that we offer on our website under resources, under professional services. And you can see that you've got some promotions and things going on here. But if we look at the professional services catalog, I'd say inventory efficiencies here is probably a good one, or managing inventory quantities is the topics that we're talking about. And you're able to come here and learn a little bit more about them right on our website. So take advantage of the promotions if you think you need extra help. Take advantage of the free resources in the Learning Academy, and there's a really good just kind of manual. And my advice would be to plan it out carefully and think about whether counting with scanners or counting with paper and pen is the right way for you to do things. And we'll continue this conversation next time. Next time, we are going to go over the process of finishing the count and the accounting effects of that, and little things that come up like the pesky yellow lines we'll talk about next time. So join us next time for the sort of completion of this webinar, and I thank you very much for coming today, all of you. I don't think it's too soon to say Merry Christmas, and my pleasure to chat with you, so we'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday. And I think the recording will be up in a day or two. We'll have this recording available for you. Thanks, everyone.